Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Broman Clash, and this morning I want to talk about a topic that has been on my mind for quite some time, and that topic is the difference between tolerance and acceptance. See, some people actually think they're one and the same. Sure, they are synonyms, and I've looked up, the definitions of both tolerance and acceptance because I have like a general idea on what they are and what they truly mean and what they are all about, as in like the words. But then as I looked up the definitions, I noticed a bit of something different. Like, wait a minute. When it comes to tolerance, people just endure things like they're forced to like them, like they're forced to understand it. While acceptance, they willingly understand it, like they willingly go out of their way just to say, like, you know what, man, I understand you go through your problems. I understand that you have your own history. I understand you have your own trials and tribulations, but I am willing, just to understand you. I'm willing to sit down and talk with you. That's acceptance. Toler to have tolerance, on the other hand, just means that, oh, you know what, man, I don't like this. But if it means just getting along, just to get along, then I'll tolerate it. Basically, something like a truce, not an agreement. Basically, if you notice that acceptance has much more of like a neutral to a positive connotation than tolerance. Tolerance has like a neutral to a negative connotation. And the reason behind that is because, even the words right down to themselves, acceptance. It sounds much more positive, right? Like you've been accepted, you've been understood, like you've been you've been, like you had your heart felt in some shape, way, or form. To tolerate, tolerate just sounds, very condescending. Very, it's just like, come on now. Okay, you're just a part of the group. You're just a basketball player with no skill. And honestly, we just need you just for the numbers. And you want to know what the crazy part is? A South Park episode actually dealt with this topic as well, but they dealt with it on like a grand, like much more on a grander scale. Well, not as grand as the recent episodes, but they did talk about it. And the episode was called Death Camp of Tolerance. And what was interesting about the Death Camp of Tolerance in that episode was the fact that it was Mr. Garrison that you know, delivered the ending lesson or the ending speech about the difference between tolerance and acceptance. Especially, okay, let's get one thing out of the way. We all know Mr. Garrison's gay. We all know he transitioned from man to woman, then back from woman to man. We all know that. Especially if you watch the recent episodes. Especially when you watch, previous episodes going on to now. Then you will know what was going on. And even he had his breaking points where he was just like, wait a minute, hold on. Why are all of you accepting this? And one guy, in like a zombified sleeping sense, said, because the museum tells us to tolerate this. Yeah, but then it should be called then Mr. Garrison says, then it should be called the Museum of Acceptance, not the Museum of Tolerance. There are some things you have to accept, like such as reality, sadness, even love, and all that stuff. But there are some things you can tolerate, and there are some things you cannot tolerate. Yeah, yeah, a gay man said that. Isn't that something? And he was doing all kinds of crazy, flamboyant crap to his boyfriend named Mr. Slave. Yeah, no, this is South Park we're talking about, but it did drop a jewel of wisdom. And it was just like, wow, Mr. Man, Mr. Garrison really hit home. And then here's one thing that really made it more interesting. You actually saw the darker side of tolerance. It literally parodied and mirrored Nazi Germany when they went to literally the death camp of tolerance, where they were treated like what happened with the Jews and in Nazi Germany, just like what happened to us back in the United States during that time, and what's going on, with Haitians and in the Dominican Republic. Yeah, and overall, how the way if you keep on telling people to, if you have like a certain propaganda about like a certain group of people, then not only people will tolerate the propaganda, they will actually follow it. But back onto the South Park thing, back onto the South Park episode, especially with the particular scene of, the death camp of tolerance. If you have to force people to tolerate something, then guess what? It doesn't make it acceptable. In fact, it makes it more terrible. And then you actually see what is truly wrong with society. See, look, for example, society doesn't really accept much things. They tolerate them, but they don't accept them. See, now that's where things get real interesting. And now back onto that South Park episode. When Kyle drew himself a bear, drew a bear, guess what the guy did? Instead of just saying like, that's actually pretty good. That's good. Keep on drawing. That's him accepting and saying like, that's good. But guess what he said in a stereotypical German accent? He said, "Ein Bär und Bär does not show tolerance." And then literally had like a gun pointed at Kyle's head. And Kyle, he was a Jewish guy. He was a young Jewish boy, but had like an immense amount of wisdom. And Eric Carmen, ironically, was being tortured too. And he loved Nazi Germany. He loved the Nazi regime, so screw Eric. But even he suffered through that crap too. But yeah, you want to know what the real funny part is, and this is true, was how the way he wanted all these children to draw out, all kinds of different people all over the world, under a rainbow, accepting things. And before you get anything wrong, let me tell you something. See, look, a rainbow usually symbolizes peace, prosperity, good fortune, and, coming together or unity. Not just solely gay pride. Let's get that one thing out of the way. All right? And then now, after seeing that, and it was just like you forcing these children to accept a reality, even though one of them just wanted to draw a bear. And then you're going to try to point a gun to that little kid's head trying to say like, oh yeah, you're supposed to do things that are tolerable, not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute. This is supposed to be a death camp of tolerance. Aren't you supposed to be, a bit accepting to that? But then that's when the lesson really drove and hit home like, wow. This is not acceptance at its fullest. In fact, this is tolerance at its lowest. This is tolerance at its darkest. Darkest at its most evil. Basically, that's not tolerance. That's just something very sinister. And then you think of and connect it to now, especially to later South Park episodes, especially when you have PC Principal, especially when he's a parody of like, politically correct cultures. Now, politically correct in all essence, let's just keep it real. Politically correct people are actually pretentiously condescending. Let's just keep it real. They're not really correct about things, and they're not political about things. They just want things to be tolerable for everyone. But in reality, and this is a sheer fact, in reality, the people have got to accept this. Things are going to be different. Things are going to change. And convenience will die. And you gotta work hard. But PC Principal represents tolerance at its most forcible. At its most forcible, basically because this is what he did. And this is true. This is to a lesser extent, but the Death Camp of Tolerance was actually pretty beautiful. But PC Principal basically talked about how How the way you gotta watch out for microaggressions, bro. You gotta watch out for all these things, bro. I'm like, man, this is just becoming really ridiculous and really annoying real quick. Because y'all want us to basically accept everyone and everything, but then you got people who forcibly try to tell us, like, yo, you gotta accept these things right here, right now. Otherwise, no, we're just gonna break your legs, or we're just gonna break you in half, or we're just gonna do everything until you accept or until you tolerate our views. And it's just like, wait a minute, man. When people accept things, it's gotta take time. But at the same time, I understand. Excuse me. I can understand when you want to prove your point and when you say, like, look, man, this is a reality that we cannot accept. You can accept it because it's benefiting you or is a convenience to you. This is not a reality for us. In fact, we've seen people getting blown up. We've seen people getting hurt. We've seen people getting shot. We've seen people getting killed over just a mere disagreement. And this is where acceptance versus tolerance comes in. See, when you accept things, you're just like, oh, all right. I do respect your opinion. But tolerance is just like, nah, okay, whatever. And then you just walk off and you just be like, oh, this is some bullshit right here, man. I never liked that. Now, that's just sad right there. And people actually think, see, look, tolerance and acceptance do have some similarities. It's just that it has some level of degree to understanding. But one has a more of a positive connotation, as I mentioned before, while the other one has a negative connotation. For example, there are some things I do tolerate. See, for example, I actually have high acceptance but low tolerance. People actually think I have high tolerance and high acceptance. Not really, no. It's just that when you have acceptance, you also understand where people are coming from. But when you have tolerance, that just means, like, you know what, man, I don't like you, but I'll just deal with you. If I don't want to deal with you, I'll tell you. But if I understand that you have problems of your own, I'll try to understand you. And I won't force myself to understand you. I'll just be like, I understand. I gotta accept that you have your own life, you have your own demons, you got your own battles that you have to face. There's nothing bad about that. In fact, that's good. It shows that you're a person. But what I do have a problem is with the fact that, like, wait a minute, people can't personally be themselves anymore. People can't personally accept themselves anymore without somebody just like, man, you're not doing things right. Okay, if it's universally a fact, see, look, acceptance is like, see, when I read the definitions, one thing about acceptance showed off was when there's a fact, meaning that it has to be accepted willingly, and it has to come to a consensus. While tolerance just means, oh, it's just an opinion, and it's just that you just have you just have to deal with certain things. For example, and y'all know me, America just tolerates black people. They don't truly accept us. There's some, okay, there are some notions where they do accept us on, such as the military, entertainment, but as equals, no. We came a long way from slavery, but at the same time, are we truly accepted as human beings? Not really, no. Not really, no. We're tolerated as people. We're tolerated, not accepted. And before you say, how can you say that? I mean, look, do they accept us walking down the street? Do they accept us with our heads held high? Do they accept us for us being us? Because if they did, then guess what? Simone Marshall would actually still be alive. Sandra Bland would still be alive. Philando Castile would still be alive. Oh, man. and myriad of other people would still be alive, including Trayvon Martin. He would still be alive. They would just accept, like, oh, maybe they're just going on about their way. They were just going on about their business. Let's just leave them alone. But nah, because acceptance is too powerful. Because in order to accept, that means you also have to, I hate the word compromise, but also you have to come to an agreement. You have to come to an understanding. And that takes a level of, actually understanding and showing off a bit of power, even vulnerability. And America doesn't want to show that. Now, does America tolerate black people? Yes. That's the sad part. America just tolerates us. They don't accept us. Hell, they tolerated Barack Obama being in office for 8 years and never truly accepted him, but they just tolerated him. See, rich and wealthy people accept Donald Trump. But here's the thing about us. We have zero tolerance and zero acceptance for Donald Trump. Now you see the difference. And when you truly look at both of the words, you realize that, wait a minute, even history has its moments of like acceptance and tolerance. But really, nobody really cares about acceptance and tolerance until it comes right down to either convenience or to actually do something right. But the real sad part is people mainly choose convenience because either it's quote unquote acceptable or really it's just tolerable for them, but for other people it's not. And then here's where things get real interesting. When you accept people, you literally look at them as an equal. You don't look at them as below you. You don't look at them in a condescending manner. You look at them as eye to eye. You look at them as people. Something that people can't even, which is really sad because people can't even do nowadays. But that also means being honest about your likes and dislikes. That's acceptance. Tolerance is just like, oh, you know what, man? Since everybody's gonna be happy, even if it means at my own compromise, so what? I mean, sure, some people say you gotta sacrifice your happiness in order to live. True. But there is a difference between being comfortable and being happy. Oh, that might actually be the next video, though. But the thing is, are people truly accepting nowadays, or are they just, just tolerating things? People say like, "Oh, we live in a time of acceptance." Is it accepting for you, or are they just tolerating you? That's my question. That's the main question. Are they tolerating you, or are they accepting you? Go back to the beginning of the video if you want to know the definitions, if you want to have a clear understanding to what tolerance and acceptance really is, or the difference between both of them. And with that, YouTube, I say this is Broman Class saying out one at one. Hope you have a good day today. Later.